Today we're going to dig into and rip apart combat in the first three episodes of Dimension 20's Neverafter. There's obviously going to be some major spoilers, so you've been warned if you continue on, but if that's all right with you, then join us for our next episode, What Went Wrong?
Well, hello there, and welcome back to this JNJtabletop video where we are continuing our What Went Wrong series. This is just where we're talking about how bad combat outcomes happened. There's a lot of things that go down in a combat that turn the tide against the players, and we realize that in this process, that hindsight is, of course, a natural 20.
That's right, there's no judgment here, just a pure analysis of the decisions made from a tactical standpoint, so we could go over and analyze what happened and why it happened. We understand that there could be a lot more factors that go into decision making in combat other than cold hard tactics.
And during this process, we may or may not discuss imagined reasons why certain choices were made, and we also might offer up how things might have gone differently if better choices were made. But at the end of the video, we are going to evaluate and give grades to the plan that the players came up with, the way they executed that plan, how and if they adjusted to things going haywire in the middle of combat, and at the very end, we're also going to evaluate and grade the Dungeon Master, in this case, Brennan Lee Mulligan. Josh, we've actually got our very first TPK that we're talking about here, and I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's exciting. Exciting from our perspective. I'm sure it was devastating for
yeah, they probably thought it sucked.
But TPKs don't happen often, especially in stream games. They very rarely happen live or well, not necessarily live. They very rarely happen on record on the internet. So it's cool. It's cool that this was here and that we're able to talk about it. I know I've never experienced one on either side of the table. Have you ever?
I don't believe so. At least as you get a little older, sometimes the memory is a little fuzzy. It didn't stand out too much, but I don't think so. I definitely haven't been the DM at one.
With all that being said, we actually do need to give some context for this episode, and that's kind of rare. We don't always go into things that happened in previous episodes or before the combat. We don't usually have to, but there's some really, really significant and important conversations and decisions specifically on Brennan, the DM's part, that we want to get into. So we're just going to get right into it.
Yeah, so in episode 3 is where the combat actually takes place, but towards the end of episode 2, the group, and it's kind of like this like twisted, weird take on fairy tales. The group is chasing the Fairy Godmother, who is this like undead sorceress witch kind of a creature. As they're chasing the Fairy Godmother, they do this group stealth check, and Brennan very clearly states that you have done your stealth check.
If you guys can all get ready to pop, you have done your stealth check. So you can all get ready to pop off at the same time if you want. Here's the issue. You're still a little bit far away and you haven't seen what you're up against yet. So you have to weigh element of surprise and all just popping off with having a little bit of distance and not knowing what you're up against.
How far away are we? Are we like 500 feet away? Are we?
I would say you're probably something like between like 60 to 90 feet away.
Basically, you have the element of surprise was the takeaway I took from it. And I think that's really significant. Brennan Lee Mulligan then says more visibility will require another stealth check. So Puss in Boots, played by Zach, the rogue. And again, we're talking about a level 1 party here. That's very significant for a lot of this. He decides to get a closer look and he succeeds on his stealth check.
And standing in the sort of yawning rot opening of the pumpkin carriage is a sickly green crown-wearing fairy with a jutting spear of glass coming from her chest, the wound scabbed over as it rests lodged within her heart. She looks sickly swamp green and like something neither living nor dead. And she is surrounded by her staff of servants here in whatever sick mockery of the world she once envisioned. She has lost much blood and much magic.
So talking about this large crowd and what they're up against, Brennan straight up says,
Managing this crowd of these half-transformed objects brought to life, it's more, if this was a fair fight, you'd all die.
And it's unfair, and it's current. And so when
well, what I mean is, if you were on an open field under the sun, you would all be dead.
I think that's kind of important too, because it is a good move as a DM, because you're letting your players know this is an overwhelming force. Doesn't mean that you can't beat them, but it means if this was a fair fight, you're going to lose. So what does that mean? You need to have sound tactics, you need to fight dirty. Players are going to get into figuring out planning.
So it does seem like she's keeping these abominations alive. So maybe if we could focus on her.
Oh,
yeah.
Maybe break her concentration.
I mean, all we need to do is get that shard. So it could be a matter of sending someone in to just cause a distraction, to have her sick all the people on them. Someone grabs the shard while her minions are away, and then everyone just tries to get that person out of there.
Yeah, they very clearly seem to be under the impression that if they just pull that spear out for whatever it is, that just means they win. Now, exactly where they get that from, I actually watched the first 3 episodes because of this, and I didn't quite fully grasp why they thought that, but nevertheless, that's the impression they were under. That's the context. But then Brian was like,
I do feel like she might be sending them off. I don't know if they're just going to stay here. We might be able to wait for some of them to leave.
Maybe the fight will be easier if they do that, but it kind of seems to just get glossed over. Like, well, what if they come this way? You know, like it's very like, and we lose the element of surprise. And there's something about it where if the dungeon master says, if this was a fair fight, you'd all die. I mean, your ears really should go, say that again? Like, what are we talking about here? Because that's kind of a big deal. But during this process, something actually kind of shocked me because, and I don't know if this is like a cultural norm or something that like they just do at their table, but as they're talking about it, there's like a little bit of levity, a little laughter.
I like that a lot. I think Rosalind should be on distraction, and I'll go with her. And I think the 3 of us can be on distraction. Okay. And the 3, they got.
So it's just the dude with the broom, me and a cat, and we're extraction team.
As you guys raise your voices a little bit, I'm gonna need another group stealth.
But
No, me.
3, 9.
Oh boy.
All of you here. What's that out in the forest?
okay, it starts now, and I just run in.
Roll initiative, baby!
The lines between like table talk and in-character talk for something like this, and just there was a big wow for me, Josh.
So I will say, big fan of Brendan Lee Mulligan. I don't watch a lot of Dimension 20 outside of the clips, but love Game Changer. I've seen every episode. If you want to talk about it, get in the Discord. We'll talk about it. But I'm very surprised by this too. I mean, the reason I mention I don't watch Dimension 20 is because you're right. They might have some sort of precedent. It could be if you make X amount of noise, then now you have to do this thing. It could also be been around 10 minutes of real time. And this is content. So is that too much table talk? Is that something that they're focusing on and that's what's driving that decision? I wouldn't do it. It's significant.
I actually think if that was something I was going to implement, I would be like, all right, guys, time out for a second. I feel like you're getting loud. So you get the impression that if you're louder or you take too much more time, then I'm going to make you roll another stealth check.
That's a way to do it. And then as a player too, like if that happened to me as a player, I'm not just letting it happen, you know. I mean, if it happens, it happens, and it ultimately the decision is up to the DM, and that's fine. But as a player, you need to speak up for yourself, and this is the second episode and the second time we've seen players not speak up for themselves. Have that conversation, call Brendan out, and say, "Hey, you know, you told us that we were good, we were ready to collaborate and figure out, you know, if we wanted to pop the F off," as he said. That's really sending mixed signals. Like at the end of the day, obviously you're going to make the final call, but do we have to make another stealth check, or do we just need to end our conversation and decide what we're doing with our actions? It's worth asking, you know?
Yes, absolutely. I completely agree. And really, I think that this moment in this episode here really effectively sets up.
If this was a fair fight, you'd all die.
Because now they've lost the element of surprise, making it a fair fight. And they didn't get a chance to fine-tune their plan.
Especially having a full session in between. Well, I don't know what their recording schedule is like, but if they
were in different clothes.
Yeah, they were in different clothes. You're right. So, assuming even if it was the next day, talk about that. So I guess, Jake, that brings us into episode 3. And before we go through initiative and who's who and breaking down the overview of actually what happened, let's go through the plan, right? They separated into 2 teams, Team Distraction and Team Extraction. Team Distraction was trying to lure the minions away. That's Rosamund, Ylfa, and Tim. And then Team Extraction, they wanted to get the shard spear thing out of the big bad while she was separated from her group. And there you had Puss in Boots, who I will probably refer to as Pibs for the rest of this, because that's what they did, Pinocchio and Gerard. They seemed to believe, Jake, they didn't have to damage her, right?
Yeah, it didn't seem to be high on the list of priorities, at least not to start. Sometimes certain strategies get you carried away, which we'll get into as we break down the combat. This is also after the combat began. Brennan also introduced, or says that there's going to be some new mechanics introduced in the middle of the combat that makes it more deadly. And again, we're talking about a level 1 party here. Josh and I, we always talk about how important it is to set expectations. And I think if you're going to do something like that, that's the kind of thing I just would want to know before this. The whole game, session, campaign, all of it, before it even starts. This is a session 0 topic. But the 2 mechanics that we're talking about is that if you deal more than half of someone's remaining hit points, they have to make a Constitution saving throw or take a level of exhaustion. And then on a critical hit, creatures must make a save. And if they fail by a certain amount, they just die outright. So I mean, that's a double-edged sword. I guess that could go in the player's favor too. But yeah, we're talking about some pretty intense moments here.
Another thing on the mechanics side, I don't know if he specifically called out the rules for this. I think it was another, like, if you deal more than half someone's damage. He rolled on an injury table. Like, they had to make a save and then roll.
Yes.
Because at one point,
poor Pinocchio.
It comes up. Poor Pinocchio. And I think those are fun things to add to a game. But exactly like Jake said, don't have that conversation when they're halfway or even in the beginning of a combat. That's a conversation that you have before they get into combat. They know what they're getting into. I also, just as a side note, there's other ways to make a horror game and a scary game without just upping the difficulty. I want to say I don't know who needs to hear that, but we all know who might need to hear that. So
www might need to hear that. So I actually didn't count the amount of enemies that they had, but I did hear the phrase that they're fighting against the Fairy Godmother plus 20. There's a group of 6. That's kind of really, really rough. So let's dive into the initiative order. Leading off, we've got Puss in Boots, or Pibs, played by Zach, who is a level 1 Tabaxi rogue. We've got Rosamund, played by Siobhan, who is a level 1 human ranger. We've got Ylfa, played by Emily, is a level 1 shifter barbarian. Then we've got the Fairy Godmother, I think also referred to as Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo. We've got Pinocchio, played by Lou, which made me want to say Bibbidi Bobbidi Lou, but that's incorrect. It's just Pinocchio, who is a level 1, and it's a reskin Warforged Warlock. We've got Gerard, played by Brian, who is a level 1, and it's like a Hobgoblin reskin fighter. Then we've got some minions. Then we've got Timothy, Mother Goose, played by Allie, who is a level 1 human bard, and then some more of those minion constructs. So let's talk about round 1, and then we'll talk about what stands out for us. Leading off with Puss in Boots, we've got Zach doing his thing where he runs up to a dead cow and hides in it. I think he actually referenced the Tauntaun from Star Wars. Then we've got Siobhan as Rosamund went up the hill. I don't know if she climbed a tree here or that was a little bit later, but she shoots a minion and exclaims something to get attention, which is good as team distraction. Ylfa, the shifter barbarian played by Emily, running around the hill to get to the center path. Of course, as a barbarian, she raged, tried to get attention, and then held her action to attack the first enemy that gets to her. And then we've got the Fairy Godmother going, who makes an attack and attacks both Ylfa and Rosamund, hitting Ylfa for 12 and Rosamund for 7. That's a lot. At level 1, it's a lot of damage. And it's just a lot. Also, I believe dealt radiant damage, which could be significant with certain weird mixed messages. But next up, we've got Pinocchio, who uses action to dash, and as Team Extraction is running far to the far hill, running around there, trying to, get in a position to take the spear out. And we've got Gerard following behind him, doing the same thing. Then we've got those minions advancing on the group, mostly through the center path towards Ilfa. And then one does head towards Gerard and Pinocchio. Timothy Mother Goose uses their action to hide amongst some debris. Doesn't do so great, but then moves to the right of the hill. The minions advance on Ilfa, and she hits one with her reaction, and one hits her, but the rage brings it down to just 1 damage. So Ilfa's like, yeah, I got this. This isn't so bad. So what do you think about round 1?
The big yikes of round 1 is just the Fairy Godmother, doing
scary
2 attacks, 12 damage, 7 damage, radiant. So it's getting past, correct me if I'm wrong, it's getting past even rage.
Yeah, any barbarian at level 1.
Yeah. I mean, we'll probably talk more about it when we give a grade, but like that plus a bunch of minions, and we'll talk more about the minions, and I'll tell you all about how I feel about those. I don't know. That's a big yikes. It should be very telling. Like that's a exclamation point above your head as a player of like, all right.
Whose footprints are these? You're going to take notice.
They can hit from far away and deal significant damage to at least 2 people.
Yeah, the level 1 factor is strong here.
Great job from Siobhan and Emily, both doing their job exactly as they were supposed to. Pinocchio and Gerard and Ali all doing the right things too.
I don't feel like anything stands out as poor, especially when you take into account the plan they're trying to execute.
Yeah.
I think round 1 was pretty good on the player's part.
Zach was a little strange, but not too bad.
All right, so let's go to round 2. So we got Zach, Puss in Boots here doing his thing, moves forward down the hill and hid by a mule that actually was still alive. I believe the mule's name was Alphonse, which comes into a kind of a funny moment later on, but then takes his action to hide. Again, can't use the cunning action because he's only level 1, but there's a few interesting things that Zach says.
What if you attack the polearm guy?
I don't want to attack anybody.
That's totally fair.
And then we go to Rosamund, who climbs the tree here and then shoots another minion and has advantage because she's up in a tree. Always good to do things like that. And hits for 11 damage. But guess what? The minion is not dead. That's another big yikes. Then we go over to Ilfa, who uses her attack to attack the minion in front of her and hits thanks to Bardic Inspiration from Timothy for 11 damage and finishes the minion, which and then gives her the opportunity to step back to draw the minions closer to her. She's hit by an opportunity attack for 2 damage, but she is also no longer in line of sight of the Fairy Godmother, which is big considering how hard Fairy Godmother hit. Fairy Godmother then makes 2 attacks against Rosamund in the tree. Thank the good Lord they both miss. Pinocchio comes over and is doing his thing, and Emily offers some advice.
I wonder if the 2 ranged people should just start hitting this woman.
I mean, yeah.
Pinocchio proceeds to use his action to dash rather than attack, and then uses his bonus action to hex the Fairy Godmother. Not a bad choice to do that. I just was wondering on that one. Gerard goes next, follows in behind Pinocchio, not really a ranged character, so uses his action to dash. And then there's some kind of weird flashback sequence of some kind, and I believe, if I read this correctly, she's the one that turned him into a frog. So the stakes got real for Gerard right there. The minions go, and Pinocchio takes 9 damage, fails his Constitution save, and literally loses an arm. But somehow manages to maintain concentration on Hex. Sometimes dice can be interesting like that. Many of the minions advance on Ilfa. Others go around the other side of the hill towards the tree that Rosamund is hiding in. And then Timothy Mother Goose uses his action to hold the action to cast message on the Fairy Godmother and then moves back around the hill, this time towards Ilfa. More minions go. Lots of misses there, but Ilfa takes 3 more damage. And then others advance up the left side of the hill. So things are starting to come into focus a little bit here, Josh. I think we got a little more to talk about on round 2.
Yeah, definitely a lot more going on in round 2, which, makes sense. I mean, it's still just like the biggest yikes are just choices from Brennan. I don't want people to see this and think that we're hating on Brennan, because I really do. Like, I'm a very big fan of Brennan.
He's great.
Yeah.
Objectively, he's great.
Yeah, objectively, honestly. I mean, 11 damage on a minion. First of all, great turn, team distraction. You're doing exactly what you sought out to do, again, which we'll continue to see. But 11 damage and it's not dead? That's insane. That's absolutely insane. Not to mention 9 damage that it does. That's no longer a minion. Something like that could be the leader of a group of minions in a typical level 1 encounter.
And that's the thing. It's a level 1 fight.
If you're just a quick encounter note, if you want to throw a bunch of minions at someone in an early level fight, Twig Blight is the model.
Beautiful example.
Not high AC, small amount of hit points, don't do a ton of damage, but if you ignore them, they're going to start to pile up.
Absolutely.
That's a level 1, not this, not whatever this is. No, this is insane.
This is rough. The thing that stands out to me so much is you look at Team Extraction here. If the objective is to take this spear out of the Fairy Godmother, I don't think there's any way you could look at that other than a strength check. And if you're looking at Pibbs, Pinocchio, and Gerard, who's making that strength check? Gerard. So what do the other two need to do? Something else that's effective. Emily gave great advice. Maybe the two ranged people should start attacking the Fairy Godmother.
Yeah.
And then Lou doesn't do it. I was like, no, say it ain't so, Lou. Come on.
Hex was a good choice.
Hex would have been great. Sure. Lead with Hex and then shoot her.
Yeah, this is where we start to see the decisions that are questionable. And this is the tough part in any fight, especially a fight that goes wrong, is do we stick to the plan or do we pivot? In this case, I think you should start hitting the boss. The ranged attackers should start hitting the big bad.
Emily brought it there served it on a silver platter.
Yep, perfect. Team Distraction, thumbs up to Team Distraction. Team Extraction, it's not that they were bad, it's just I think they should have pivoted, but
they were
maybe
stubborn.
We'll talk more about that.
Yep. All right, so that brings us to round 3, where we've got Puss in Boots. He actually knows the mule that he's hiding behind and sets up a plan to ride the mule away when the fight is done. That was kind of fun. He uses his Tabaxi feature to double his movement, which is great. And then he uses that 60 feet to climb up the pumpkin, get to the Fairy Godmother, and then actually uses his action for some kind of a deception check to convince the Fairy Godmother that he's there to help get the spear shard out of her. She appears to believe him. That's pretty good. Maybe there's an off path to extracting this spear. Then we move over to Rosamund. She uses her action to attack a minion near Ilfa, who hits for 9 damage and takes him down. Then she moves and slips on her way out of the tree, taking 1 damage, and she falls prone. She stands up and moves towards Ilfa. Ilfa then uses her action to use an enemy as a ranged human shield rather than attack, but it does succeed. So I think Brennan ended up ruling as that was some kind of like cover or half cover situation, which was pretty cool, actually. The Fairy Godmother's up next. He uses her action to attack Pinocchio, hits him, and he goes down. Pinocchio, I then just get skipped. I don't think they actually rolled a death save at that point for Pinocchio, which... Well, we already know where this is headed. Spoiler alert, TPK.
If you ask Pinocchio, he'll say, yes, he did roll a death save, and his nose will grow.
It is, yes. And then we get a little fun RP kind of thing happening where Gerard attacks the Fairy Godmother with his bow, but misses. And then he tries to jump at the Fairy Godmother's legs as she hovers in the air, but he yells, "Unfrog me!" Like he's like all worked up about it. This is the moment where Timothy decides to use the time to cast message, which ended up convincing her to go lower and then made the DC easier on Brian. Still didn't work because the dice just hated Brian in this episode. The minions then go. Gerard gets hit for 9 and he fails his exhaustion check. Gerard takes 16 more points of damage and was 1 point away from being killed outright. Then Timothy Mother Goose goes, uses their action to disengage and runs around towards Ilfa, and then uses bonus action to Healing Word Ilfa because there was no line of sight actually on Gerard to bring him back up. So again, things are happening and things are starting to turn here in round 3, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, I think good move from Ali. You know, when they used Healing Word. Healing Word's always a good choice.
It's twice as effective on a Raging Barbarian in some ways, too.
It is. Yeah, that's very true. Unless you're talking about Radiant. Unless you're talking about Radiant damage.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Just the main thing that I would focus on here is just Emily's advice continuing to be ignored. Siobhan's doing great at attacking minions, and I have to give her points using her attack every time, because obviously we've already seen that people have chosen not to. I don't know. I think attacking Fairy Godmother was good advice, and it's still being ignored. Pibs, interesting. This is very interesting. And when I watched this, I didn't even think about the fact that he was trying to convince her, hey, we're here to help get the shard out. I just focused on the we're here to help. He could have taken that a totally different way. He used his action to do deception check, but then he also asked for the wand, which Brennan said. To that point, yeah. That's it, yeah. Well, Brennan said that's going to be a persuasion check. It'll take your action on your next turn. So he's said that that's what he wants to do. You know, we'll see whether he does that or not. But like, you've succeeded on your deception check, and you actually do want to take the spear / shard out of her. Yep. That's not even really deception. That's more persuasion at that point. Yeah. And it's the truth. Why add anything else in there? Just to say, let me get this. My friend is coming. Yeah. You know, and then he doesn't have to. I don't know. It's just a. If you want to
watch a good example of riding the line of where a deception check needs to be called for, watch Vale talking to Freeman when we get to Malaya Smear and Ancient Relics and Oki Religions. You kept saying, should I? No. Okay.
Being clever as a player. I know what you're trying to do as a DM, but you know, is it fair to actually ask for a deception check at a certain point? I don't know. I mean, check it out. You'll find out. That was a fun encounter too. I feel like those are really some of the biggest moments for me.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. This is the point where Rosamund doesn't waste anything, but you do have to start wondering, all right, if your thinking is all we have to do is get the spear out, you're either thinking A, that's going to destroy the Fairy Godmother, and you're kind of assuming that perhaps the minions or things will like no longer be animated or something like that. So this is where you start thinking about two paths to victory. We're going to damage the Fairy Godmother and take her out, or we're going to pull the thing out and take her out. And Rosamund could have had a chance to affect that. Ilfa's overwhelmed. Like, what's the difference between the minion in front of her attacking her or the three behind her attacking her when they're bottlenecked and can't get to her anyway? Like, that's the kind of thing where you have to start thinking, like, she's going to be attacked twice, whether I do this or not. Again, not wasted, but could have done better. Let's talk about round 4. Josh, you alluded to it. Puss in Boots has some things to think about.
I think that what Pib would see on that high investigation roll is not an easy solution for the situation in front of you. I think you would see a number of the paths forward from here have already shut at this point, and only incredibly risky options are left.
How injured does she look?
Unfortunately, no one's gotten a hit off on her.
Right, but wasn't she previously injured? I think it. But...
You see that she has a somewhat undead form, but it looks to have like congealed. She's got the shard in her chest. Yeah. So unfortunately, at this moment, she's totally uninjured.
Just a reminder, round 4. So he does his persuasion check at disadvantage to try and get the Fairy Godmother to give him her wand. Was told this would be very difficult ahead of time, and it was a DC 20, and at disadvantage, he failed. And then he ran into the pumpkin to try and get out of sight. Now Rosamund, after advice from Emily...
She might not have that many hit points. We should maybe just start hitting her.
And actually hits the Fairy Godmother, and Brennan proudly announces...
19 is going to hit. This will be our first hit on the Fairy Godmother.
All right. Hey. Oh, yes. Okay. That's a 12 damage.
Nice.
12 damage. Are you within 60 feet of her? You are outside of range. You do 12 damage to the Fairy Godmother.
Yeah.
Fairy Godmother is undead. The arrow thuds into her. Ah! She screams out in pain. She looks still wrathful, full of fury, but clearly badly injured by that.
Oh, wow.
By that attack.
Yeah, that's
she can't take those. She does not look battered. She does not. She's got a lot of fight left in her, but she can't take those all day.
And then another thing I just want to mention, Brennan takes out this thing to measure out if Rosamund was within 60 feet. And you should be paying attention to things like that as a player. Be like, why is 60 feet significant after I just hit her? Is that metagaming? Sure. I don't know. That's still something you should be thinking about. Ilfa then uses her attack to attack the guy that she's grappling, but misses. Fairy Godmother moves into the pumpkin, blocking the doorway, and attacks Pibbs. 1 miss, 1 hits for 6 damage, but he passes his exhaustion check. Lou fails his first death saving throw, Gerard fails his first death saving throw. And now the minions begin circling both hillsides, and Rosamund is hit for 3 and goes down. Timothy Mother Goose uses his action to disengage, gets into line of sight of Gerard, and uses Healing Word on Gerard to get him back up. And some minions hit Ilfa for a total of 4 damage. Definitely going south still, but we did hit the Fairy Godmother the first time in this round, Josh.
Finally, they're listening to Emily. Great choice. But it's worth noting, first attack was a hit. 12 damage was a lot. It wasn't half her hit points, otherwise there would have been saves and stuff involved. He mentioned that she's not bloodied or anything like that yet, but she can't take a whole lot more of these. And what that tells me is that if people just start attacking, you're going to do something. It might not be the first round of attacking, but if you have multiple people attacking one target, I'm of the mind that it would have been over by now if all of them were trying to attack.
If you've got a ranged ranger and a warlock, and you're within 60 to 90 feet, you've got one job. You just do.
I agree. And Rogue, who was right there. And that's what I mean about, I really talked about it, I think all I need to in the last one, so I'll just say, you've already had that conversation with her. She trusts you, and you're doing something that is so clearly, we've talked about this in videos before. Just because you could do a deception or persuasion check doesn't mean that you're going to convince the king to hand you his crown.
It's a big ask. 20 was a nice DC to set that at.
Yes. Yeah, it shouldn't have been attainable. I don't know. I probably would have told him, like, if you want to roll, you could roll, but she's in the middle of combat, and I think it's fair to say that there's no world where she's going to hand you that in the middle of combat. And she's probably going to see you as hostile as soon as you ask. What are you going to do? Like I said, Rosamund taking an attack. Fantastic. You'd love to see it. Yeah, just people are just dropping.
Yeah, because they're level 1. I don't really have anything to add to your analysis because I completely agree. So in level 5, we've got Puss in Boots leading off again, and he readies an attack against the Fairy Godmother until the conditions of sneak attack are met, which I just kind of chuckled, and you'd have to watch my Rogue video to understand why. Highly recommend you do it. But during his turn, he asks that if there's anything in the room that might be useful.
There's not like stuff in here that I should investigate, right? Or does it seem like I kind of just can't really see as a human being right now?
I think investigation, you could investigate right now if you wanted to, but there is someone who's really going to kill you.
Yeah. And you're saying investigation would take my action. Is that what
you can go ahead and give me investigation with disadvantage.
That's a 9.
There are some things of potential significance or importance in here, but you're in the midst of pitched combat, and...
Oh, this is my life now.
I think he's really trying to steer him into the lane of you doing something useful with his action instead. I do think it's significant that a rogue player on their own felt like what they could do against the solo target wasn't worth trying. So anyways, moving on to Rosamund failing death saving throw number 1. Ilfa then...
But then they'll all flank me, but that's kind of what I need to do. But I can only go half my movement. All right, then. And if I move backwards, though, I think I just have to stay where I am. Like, and just let them descend on me, because at least they're not descending on you guys. Okay. I take a deep breath, and I let the girl fade and the wolf take over.
Emily knows the job of a tank or a defender to stand their ground, even if it means they might not survive. And this whole fight is just me just tipping the cap the whole time. The whole time to Emily. A+.
Excellent. Yeah, absolutely.
And we've got the Fairy Godmother who goes up next, attacks Pib, hits for 6 damage, and now he's down. Which Brennan Lee Mulligan did drop Pib, but allows him to use his readied action because of the just desperate nature of everything and just a pure defensive, life-preserving instinct. This is just a theory, but it sounds like to me perhaps there was a chance that he could drop her. That's probably not as likely, but at least give the group some much-needed help with one solid hit. Then we move on to Lou as Pinocchio, who fails death saving throw number 2. And then we've got Gerard, and this is where things start to get a little interesting and desperate.
I'm just trying to think if I should go for the shard or if I should attack. Because
I don't think she's that hurt, but me rolling with disadvantage is so bad. Can anybody help me?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Do I go? When do I go? Unless I get absolutely clobbered on my way over.
I hit her for 12 damage. Brennan said that she couldn't stand too many of those.
But she also, it wasn't half her hit points.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. I think I will.
Maybe the moral of the story is there's no good answer.
Yeah, I'm just gonna ready an action to try to grab the glass out.
Nice.
And if somebody gets to me, cool. If I'm like swarmed or something, then I'll just go for it with disadvantage.
Again, the group just convinces themselves not to attack the Fairy Godmother because they think she has too many hit points, despite the warning that she can't take 12 points of damage all day. As the minions go, Lou recognizes some patterns that they as players have.
I am realizing this is we're like doing everything exactly the same way we did it in the first episode of Fantasy High. Like it's the exact same thing of like, if we all had just attacked it, we could have won. But instead, we did a bunch of like crawling and get up in there.
I mean, at this point though, it's me with a one-handed sword, and it's like, am I really gonna kill this thing with a D8?
Well, yeah. I mean, at this point, we need
we need the one. We need the Hail
not
Mary.
But it is funny to just hey,
no,
you make us level 1 characters, we're gonna run the same play every time.
The minions hit Ilfa for 4, and she takes a level of exhaustion. They also engage with and attack Timothy, hitting him twice for 7 and 8, and that drops him. Gerard decides to try and grab the spear shard there with a DC of 13 set by an open roll, and Alphonse the donkey just runs away, which turns out to be the distraction that Gerard needed to cancel out the exhausted disadvantage. Very much a gift, but it didn't matter because Gerard still rolled a natural 3. The dice hated Gerard this whole time.
Yeah.
Mother Goose fails death saving throw number 1, and that really does bring round 5 to a close. I mean, really, the writing's on the wall, I think, here, Josh. But
I mean, we'll get into it, I think, at the very end. But I don't know. This was just...
It's just falling apart because that's all you have left at this point.
Yeah, half the party is dead or unconscious. There's not much anyone can do. It was nice of Brennan to throw them a bone with, Alphonse runs away.
I just keep thinking the Italian Christmas donkey running away. That's all I hear. But yeah, that was just a gift.
The main thing I want to talk about, it's about Lou and his comment of, if we would have attacked her, I think we could have won this. Because that is my initial thought. But I want to wait until we finish out round 6 before I really get into my thoughts on that. And tactics aside, I mean, involved or whatever, I don't know how much I blame the players for this. But I
agree.
I'm just rambling now, so maybe we just get into the next round and I'll really
I think we're
get
good.
into it.
That's a good plan. So leading off round 6, we've got a failed death saving throw from Puss in Boots. We've got Rosamund taking a death saving throw, but succeeding this time. She's got 1 of each. Ilfa uses her action to disengage and then runs to a better position on some debris and then uses another rage to just keep the rage going. Fairy Godmother uses her action to magically attack Ilfa for 4 radiant damage, but that drops her. Pinocchio fails death save number 3, and Pinocchio is now dead, officially. Gerard uses his action to make another attempt to try and pull out the spear shard thing, and Brennan offers the option of canceling out the exhaustion mechanic, the disadvantage there, by foregoing his own bodily safety, and he agrees. And with an open roll, the DC is set at 18, but Gerard still succeeds. But the Fairy Godmother has a 3d10 rebuke ability. This is why earlier in round 4, he took out that measuring thing to see how far away Rosamund was, which 60 feet is just insane. And that's triggered by his decision to not be safe. Gerard is down because it's 3d10 damage and he's a level 1 character. The interesting thing here to me that stands out is that the spear and shard is removed, which actually was the goal of the party, but the animated minions are still active. And then the rest of this is just death saves and continuing on. But the ruling is that they need a nat 20 because even just succeeding, the minions will eventually kill them. So there's a lot of very interesting things to talk about here, Josh. Let's just wrap up the combat before we talk about our evaluations. But, 3d10? 3d10?
3d10 is insane. There's really nothing to evaluate here. And the second half of this it's insane to me that they just continue rolling death saves and several of them succeed and stabilize. But he's like, well, since you didn't roll a natural 20, eventually these minions are gonna find you and crush you. And it's like 3d10 is insane. 60 feet is insane. Initially, my thoughts are, okay, yeah, for a strategy, you need to pivot and you need to start doing what Emily said. Start attacking the big bad. Your rogue, when he was right up next to her, and instead of trying to do persuasion, attack. Just keep hitting, make something happen. Those are my initial thoughts, right? But the expectation there is after you kill this thing, and whoever lands the final blow, if they're within 60 feet, they're going to die. The expectation is whenever the big bad is dead, these minions who work for the big dead and were animated by the big bad are either going to, if for some reason the magic holds and there's still just furniture going about life, then what motivation do they have to kill you? And if they die and stop being animated, then great. If they're all still going to be alive and you have 20-ish of them, they're going. It's not possible.
It's just way too much.
This is like beyond the Kobayashi Maru. Like this is like you are designed to fail, and any DM who's DM'd even just one full campaign would know that. He's way too much of an experienced DM for this to be just an accidental, I thought maybe they could win it. Like, they're set up for failure from the very beginning with that extra stealth check. And then the combat was just minions in general. If this is probably, they were doing what, 9 points of damage and you were dealing 11 points of damage to them. There's 20 of those. That would probably still be considered a difficult encounter for level 3 to 5, I would say.
With that many of them, yeah.
With that
absolutely.
many.
Oh yeah.
Especially with the big bad. This is just it's outrageous. I want to give them all a hard time. I want to say, hey, you should have attacked. Hey, you shouldn't have used message. Hey, why did you try to convince her to do this when you could have convinced her to do that or just attack? But they're set up for failure from the beginning, even though he said in multiple interviews that they weren't, and it was attainable but difficult.
It's hard to believe. It is, because he's not even close to a novice. Like, he's literally a professional, and something is off. So if you just look at it from the combat side of things, right? How different could this have gone if they got that surprise round? And you can correct me about that in the comment section. It could have been very different. Who knows what could have happened? Maybe they did the sleep spell that they were discussing about using instead of the 2 healing words. They could have done a sleep, and who knows? Maybe they could have dropped some of them. Maybe 1, considering how many hit points those minions had, which is a little ridiculous to me. But I don't know exactly how that could have gone, but that was hugely important. All other options were gone at that point, and it did set up that fair fight means you die. But an undead fairy godmother dealing radiant damage, that's a mixed message and a half right there. And I was a little unclear as to why they were attacking in the first place. Because, I mean, Pinocchio's patron is the wicked stepmother, so there's something weird there, too. So, like, back in my day, undead were evil, and, like, celestials were good. Like, there were certain things that, like, they just kind of were understood, you didn't really, like, think about that or wonder about that. It's just always how it played out, too. And whether that's good or bad, that's you could decide that. But with how difficult this was, were they supposed to fight her?
I would lean towards no. There were two moments where she just straight up, well, there were a couple moments, but the 2 that stand out in the beginning is she says to Gerard, I believe, like, we're trying to fix this. And then she's also, she says to Pibbs when he convinces her, oh, we're here with the princess. We're here to help you. And she's like, oh, good. You're here to help me.
Yeah.
Like
Cinderella?
Yeah.
Usually a good guy, right? Like,
yeah.
It's like, is this weird? I don't know. Something's off.
But I missed this watching it. I'm going to have to watch it back. But like, if the conversation, the deception check was like, we're going to get that thing out of you and we're going to help you, at the very end, she says to Gerard, like, no, don't do it. like we're trying to fix this. We're trying to, a lot of mixed signals, which can be fun, but I'm really just talking about the DM, so I don't know.
So let's do that. Let's jump to our evaluations here. We'll save the DM for last because I know that's got you going. So to me, when I think about the plan, I don't think it was a bad plan. I don't think it was a particularly great plan. I give it a C minus. I think it's in that average range. I don't think there was anything particularly bad with it, but nothing stood out as like, ooh, this is a good plan.
Yeah, I gave it slightly better than that. I gave it a C plus, and again, I agree with you. Don't think it was particularly bad. Could potentially even be a good plan. I think my main problem with the plan itself is they did not allocate their resources properly.
Yep.
You have barbarian. Barbarians, if you are assuming that you're going to have to do a strength check, barbarian is who you want to be doing that. Not that fighter's a bad option, but you know.
To me, I would have switched Pinocchio and Mother Goose because Pinocchio could have been doing the same thing as Rosamund with the ranged attacking and support, while Mother Goose would have been there to give a bardic inspiration to the person pulling this thing out. Or that would have been a nicer grouping, I think.
Yeah, agreed.
And nothing stood out as it was okay. It was an okay plan. It was fine.
It was fine is exactly how I would describe it.
Yeah,
why I give it a C plus. You know, you still passed.
Yes.
Yeah. You're just not going to put it on your fridge.
No, no, you don't even need your mom or dad to sign it either. All right. So the execution of the plan. What did you think about how they went about doing it?
I mean, execution of the plan, I'd give them a B. They stuck to the plan. They did their jobs for the most part. You know, there were some questionable moments, and some of them I think the DM kind of turned around for good with like message. I think that's probably beyond the scope of a message, but it worked in
a little bit.
And Zach with just the deceptions and persuasions, I already kind of went into that. But those are two moments where like the execution was questionable for me. But I mean, team distraction freaking killed it. Emily, it was the perfect example of a tank and what a tank should do. She was fearless. She's in there. She's protecting them. She knew her job. And Siobhan, it did kind of the same thing. I mean, we'll talk about this in a moment where I think they should have pivoted, but she attacked every time. You know, she's a striker. That's her main thing. Yes, she can do other things, but everybody did their job for the most part. So I'd give it a B.
Yeah, I give it a B as well. I think that overall they had an okay enough plan, and I think they did, largely what you said. There wasn't any really like glaring mistakes that made me just go, oh my God, like, that was a complete waste. You could see some wasted opportunities, but like I just, Emily was a rock star and pulls it up to a B for me. So how about their ability to adjust, Josh?
They didn't. You know?
Yeah.
It's called out pretty early. What was it, round 2 when Emily suggests?
I wonder if the two ranged people should just start hitting this woman.
I mean, yeah.
And they don't. And I think that's a huge miss. Again, don't know how much it would have mattered, but you just have them stick rigidly to the plan and not really adjust at all to the circumstances. Yeah. And I respect that to an extent because what we saw in our last episode of this show is the opposite of that. I don't know. Either stick to your plan or create a new plan. They stuck to their plan exactly, so I'm going to give it an F for not adjusting, but they at least didn't create their own individual plan, each of
them,
and ruin everything. So
yep,
it gets an F.
I was slightly more generous with a D, just because I think Emily did point it out very early. So to me, at least the opportunity was there. So I guess ignoring good advice actually really shouldn't be a bonus for the group. But what I will say is, I think by the time it started to sink in for everyone, they were so just in the weeds. Like it was like, they even said it now, like we're kind of backed into the situation where we need that Hail Mary to win. So there's a certain recognition point factor that I guess I'm grading on a curve when I say a D. And so that's where I was with that. But either way, it really was not very good. And Josh, I mean, we come to the DM. I think we know where you're going with this one.
Yeah, I mean, Brennan is objectively an excellent DM, but in this scenario, he gets the lowest grade possible. Brennan gets an F. And in fact, I wonder, was that Brennan or was that Wenin Wee Welligan? Was he replaced by his Wario counterpart? It was insane. I mean, when you break it down for me, it's either they weren't meant to fight her. If they were not meant to fight her, it's your job as a DM to send your players signals, let them know. Try to make it as clear as possible. You could do this without metagaming. You could do this without railroad. Just let them know she's a friend. She was attacking them right at the beginning, starting in round 1. So it's you could have at least given them that opportunity if that was the case, and that's a last ditch effort. They should have known beforehand if she wasn't meant to be fought. If she was meant to be fought, what the hell? Like that was the most poorly balanced encounter I've ever seen. I've seen some bad encounters. I've played in some bad encounters. I've created some bad encounters myself, and I've absolutely pushed the bounds of what a party could go up against. But this is just absolutely insane.
Yes, and I have to give him an F too, because you laid it out really well. If they're not supposed to fight the Fairy Godmother, they had no idea. And if they are supposed to, it really wasn't even possible. I don't even think with a surprise round or even an A+ plan, an execution, I'm not sure it would have mattered. And that 3d10 rebuke ability, 3d10 has a maximum damage of 30 and a minimum damage of 3. So it's 33 divided by 2 is 16.5. That's going to drop a barbarian in one shot. It's level 1 right there. Like if you want to try and experiment with deadly things, we have videos on the CR system and things like that. Level 1 is not when you get fancy because of this exact sort of thing. The hit points they're just too low.
And if they were meant to fight her, but not yet, you could show them that too.
She teleports away and now it's just the minions. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
there could have been ways to be like, oh, they're way out. They have the wrong idea.
But if you wanted to terrify them, instead of making them do another stealth check, just, hey, it's been a little bit, even if it's just Zach, see this, like something else, something that they can't fight or whatever. She just decimates it. Show them that. Let them know this is an incredibly powerful creature.
Yeah.
Probably not going to win. It's still a fun encounter because they're right there. Now they have to escape.
Yes. Yep.
So still good content, still a fun encounter, just completely different. Those are kind of the three things for me. It's either they weren't meant to fight and it wasn't communicated. They were meant to fight and it was horribly balanced or just not at all. Or they were meant to fight but not yet and it wasn't communicated.
The lack of communication with the new mechanics too. Literally players losing arms. There's a lot to criticize here, and I don't know what kind of plan / session 0, whatever you want to call it, they may have had with this, and maybe something was hinted at or whatever it is, but he's just way too good at this to give him anything other than an F here. Giving him an F is actually us saying how good he is, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And you can say whatever you want about it in the comment section if you want, but at least that's the point where we are. But Josh, there's some emerging themes we're seeing so far in these two, and it seems like the biggest one is not attacking the boss seems to be an ineffective strategy.
I agree.
It's weird.
Michael Scott and Wayne Gretzky said it best. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. That boss, you want to keep saying, oh, that big bad has a lot of hit points. Well, going to continue to have a lot of hit points if you don't hit him. And I will say, you've heard me say this multiple times before, especially if you've watched our series on the action economy. 5e is a game taking as many actions out of the economy as you can. So typically, taking out minions, not a bad plan. When you realize that Emily is pretty much holding them off by herself, obviously she's not going to be able to do that for forever, but she did for long enough, and you realize that you can't quickly take them out, probably going to take you an average of 2 rounds to take out each of those minions.
And you believe taking the boss out will take out the minions?
That's when you pivot. You won't kill the boss if you don't hit the boss, and understand when you get diminishing returns out of attacking minions. If you could run away from them and still attack the boss, attack the boss.
The other theme I see for this is that creativity is great. It's one of my favorite things about the game, but in combat, I'll just say it this way, the cost of the creativity, like trying to convince a witch to give you their wand in the middle of a fight, like creativity like that, the cost is higher because now you've spent your action, something that could have been used to damage the boss. Those kinds of things, it's just so much higher in combat.
I'd still encourage players to be creative, but like exactly what you said, you have to just weigh the outcome. You really think she's going to hand it over It's just not.
Could you give me your sword, big scary paladin guy? Like
that's how
no.
every bard would fight. Everyone would be a bard, and you would play as the pacifist. Walk in and be like, "Hey, how you doing? How's your mother? How's your brother? Okay, hey, why don't you put the gun down? All right, give it to me. Okay, all right, yeah, see you later."
Yep.
Now you could talk to my friend the paladin. He said he wants to talk to you about a bite, a kite, oh yeah, a smite, and then you said, like,
boom. The cost is just it's higher. That's all. Just weigh the cost.
Well, we do have a lot of overarching themes, and I expect that we'll continue to see those throughout this series. Episode 2, blame goes largely in the DM. If you agree with that or if you disagree with that, comment down below. And if I could ask one more thing from you, let us know an episode of one of your favorite shows where something went wrong, even if it's one of our shows and we just glossed over it. Drop it down below and maybe that'll be our next episode. Thanks for watching. And if you want to learn how to win in combat, check out this video.